Well, I said yesterday it was going to be interesting to see how Mercedes reacted to the situation on Friday in Mexico when Red Bull Honda were all over them in all but one area, top speed. Mercedes had that margin with which to play, and it's very clear that overnight they did put more downforce into the two cars for Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. It's very difficult, of course, to talk in terms of detail because the Mercedes factory team, more than any other on the Formula One grid, are very, very good at gradually or perhaps incrementally increasing the power from their power unit as qualifying goes on. And we saw it today, the two Mercs really good in a straight line, but also lots of grip and both drivers having lots of confidence. But let's look at the numbers and try to extrapolate what's going on and what has been going on in terms of top speed. Yesterday, Valtteri and Lewis 347, 345 kilometers an hour in terms of terminal velocity on that long straight. Saturday morning, Valtteri and Lewis were both slower than that, 344, 341. And then in qualifying, of course, with more power, they were quicker on the straight, but they weren't massively quick. If you look at, say, Daniel Ricciardo, another driver with the Mercedes engine, 350 kilometers an hour, and Valtteri and Lewis in the final runs in qualifying, 348. So if you take into account the amount of power that Mercedes have, you've got to say they're running a lot more wing than they were yesterday. They got a lot more downforce. And now, by contrast, let's have a look at what Red Bull Honda did. Adrian Newey and his team. Difficult situation when you've got Friday looking as good as it was, but you're a little bit nervous about top speed and what Mercedes might do overnight, of course, in putting on more downforce. I suggested yesterday that maybe Red Bull would perhaps take away some downforce, try to get a bit more top speed. I don't think they did that with Sergio Perez, but I think they did it with Max Verstappen, and I think it showed in the times today. Max yesterday 333. Let's hear it for the 33s. Saturday morning 338. Now, not a massive increase, but enough possibly for Max to feel the sweet spot has gone from the car and the car is sliding around a little more. That's what he said at the end of FP3 this morning, and that's what he was talking about during qualifying. Q3, when he was out on a set of soft tyres, coming out of what used to be the hairpin, is now sort of double apex, right, the slowest part of the circuit. Well, almost the slowest, I think. Yeah, maybe the stadium's a bit slower. He had one of these coming out, which is very unusual for Max on a qualifying lap. But that's indicative for me, anyway, that Red Bull Honda have gone over that sweet spot of grip that they had yesterday. Very easy for me to say all this. It's all kind of very simplistic, but sometimes racing is that simple. And so to put it in a nutshell, I think that Red Bull were exactly where they could be yesterday with the limit of the car, the top speed they had. That was the perfect compromise for the Mexican circuit. Mercedes didn't have the perfect compromise yesterday. They had a lot of margin with which to play in top speed. They used that to get some more grip, and they got the pole. They got the pole, I think, because they got it right, whereas Red Bull, had they not touched the car, probably would have been even quicker than Mercedes. But what can you do? You got to try. And certainly in the case of Max Verstappen, a driver who's so good at living with all the variables, you would say, well, I would say, if I was sitting there in a debrief, yeah, can we take a bit of wing out of the car? Max, you can live with a bit of the back end twitching around, can't you? Yeah, you can do it. And that's probably what happened, I think. Of course, it'll be a different story in the race tomorrow when DRS comes into play, and I think you'll find Max is right there. But I think that's what defined qualifying. It was a really interesting session as a result. But for all the Sergio Perez fans out there in Mexico, it was a disappointing day. He looked really good in FP3 on Saturday morning, but his first qualifying run was the run in which he lost his rhythm because it was ruined by Lance Stroll inelegantly going off at the end of his lap. Sergio was on a lap at that point, so that put him out of rhythm. And then in Q2, when they switched to medium tyres, which is obviously a little bit of a change, obviously, in the way the car feels and handles, Sergio did a 17.0 to Max's 16.4. So a big difference there when they got onto the medium tyre. I would put that down to Sergio getting out of rhythm, getting out of sync with his qualifying lap. Everybody ran the medium tyre, so it's kind of, what are we going down this road for? Because the whole point of getting drivers to start on the tyre they use in Q2 is to try to get some variations and differences from car to car, but everybody ran the medium, as I say. Everybody except Yuki Tsunoda, but that was kind of a moot point because he's starting from the back of the grid anyway due to engine penalties. But he did go pretty well on it. He used the soft tyre to get through to Q3. And then in the last run in Q3, Max was behind Sergio, not really close enough to get a toe, but he did get a little bit of assistance on the main straight in terms of top speed. Sergio was following and catching Tsunoda, who, as we all know, was starting from the back of the grid. And Tsunoda went off in turn 10, I think it was. The S's went straight on. And Sergio looks as if he kind of went off in sympathy, we used to say, kind of lost vision going into the corner. He was watching the other car probably and decided to go straight on as well. And then Max, who was behind him on his last quick run, then had a decision to make. Are those two cars going to come back on the track? Are they going to put the yellows out? Is there any stuff on the track anyway? And while all that was going on, he came out of the power and they didn't put the yellow out. He got on the radio and said something like, what an idiot. And afterwards he said, there were two guys in front of me, as if he didn't even know that one of them was his teammate. But anyway, that was the second run for Max that was gone. I thought it was interesting afterwards that Max said, and he's correct to say this, qualifying's one thing, but we're all starting on the medium tyre tomorrow and it's a different deal when we're on that tyre. And of course, he's absolutely right. So let's just have a look and see what happened in Q2 when they're all on the medium tyre, because this is what will have a real impact on that first phase of the race tomorrow. On the medium tyre, Lewis did a 16.4 to be quickest, but he used 2 sets to do that. So that was his second run. Max did a 16.4 as well, but he did it only on one run. He went out on softs at the end just to sort of bank a lap, see if anybody was going to do anything, and he had a set of soft tyres on just in case he needed to react. But of course he didn't. So he's starting the race on the medium tyre, 16.4, but only that one run. Yuki Tsunoda did 16.7 on the soft tyre, which gives you an idea of how much quicker the soft tyre was. And Valtteri Bottas, who's on the pole, 16.8 on the medium tyre on his second set, which is 4/10 slower than Max did on just one set of medium tyres. So that's why Max is saying, let's wait and see what happens tomorrow on the medium tyre, because in his view, the Red Bull has it all over the Mercs when they're on the medium tyre. And of course, he does have a point there. And so it all comes down to Max being on the clean side of the road in P3, Valtteri on the pole, Lewis on the right. For sure, the two Mercs will have a lot of power off the line, but they're all starting on the medium tyre, so it's going to be a little bit edgy as to who can find the right grip level. Could be Max, could be one of the two Merc drivers, could be both of them. And it's a long straight as well, but even without DRS, they're all going to be, Max is in a position to get a tow, as is Lewis from Valtteri. So Valtteri's not going to feel very comfortable going into the first corner, I wouldn't have thought, because on the inside of him, he's going to have Lewis Hamilton, and he'll be in his mind will be, I'm a Mercedes driver, just still, and they're hoping we get the Alpha drive, so I better not do anything here, I've got to look after Lewis. And at the same time, he's got to protect his lead, obviously, from anything that Max Verstappen might do. Max is probably thinking Valtteri's going to be eyeing up Lewis, making sure he doesn't do anything to Lewis, so I might try and go around the outside going into the first corner. I think there's a bit of relief at Red Bull, Honda, if they think about it, because after FP3 this morning, when Sergio Perez was quickest and all of Mexico exploded, 17.0, very good lap he did, looked really good on the lap. I think at Red Bull, they would have been thinking, if by whatever reason Sergio is on the pole today or ahead of Max, because he's looking really good and he's got all the crowd behind him, it's not going to be an easy conversation with Sergio to say, look, Sergio, if you're in a position to let Max pass, do it. Because that's, of course, what they're going to have to ask because of the championship. But now that it's the way it is, with Sergio quantifiably behind Max on the grid in both position and in pace, then of course that's a moot point as well. There's something that came up yesterday, and I've been thinking about it. I wanted to sit on it for 24 hours because it kind of put the lie to what I've been saying about Max is an early breaker, because they showed a graphic going into turn 10 of how Max was actually braking later than Sergio Perez in there. I've got to say here, I think the graphics, when they are comparing teammates, are the most interesting ones, because obviously then you've got a fair table from which to make any sort of comments. When you're doing other comparisons, like they did one between Max and Valtteri braking into turn 1, this morning actually, and bearing in mind there was like a 15-kilometre-an-hour difference in top speed when the two drivers hit the brakes. It's kind of irrelevant as to who braked early and who braked late. Of course, Max braked later because he wasn't going as quick. I mean, that's obvious. But when you've got two teammates in comparison, and Sergio Perez is in the other car, and he's actually braking earlier than Max Verstappen, well, then that makes you think, yeah, that's quite interesting. What's going on there? Of course, it turns out that turn 10 is actually a very quick corner. It's 265 kilometers an hour entry, and it never drops below 160, and it gets much quicker as you come out of it through 11. And my thinking about that is that this isn't an example of a corner where you've really got to be hard on the brakes and create the platform that I've been talking about, and I talked about in a video a while ago. This sort of corner, when it's relatively high speed, and it's a nice bit of road there, it really is a nice bit of road, those S's in Mexico. This is the sort of corner where the car on the limit is going to be a bit twitchy. It's going to be a bit edgy because we're in thinner air, because maybe in Max's case, he's running a little bit less downforce than the car would want him to have. And Sergio's living with that as well. That was yesterday. Maybe not much, but enough to make the car a little bit twitchy. And in that situation, I would say that it's not that Max is going to be braking late and doing anything with really late braking. I would say that it's the opposite. I would say it's Sergio Perez in that situation when the back end's a bit edgy on a high-speed corner. He's the one that's actually going to brake a little bit earlier and give the car the sort of confidence, stability that it needs to get through that quick right-hander. And I think that's more Sergio just giving himself a confidence lift going into the corner than it is a confidence boost, rather, not lift, than it is Max just being a really late braker there. I think Max is just doing his normal thing and he's braking at about the point he needs to have his stability. It's just that he's also so good at balancing the car on the edge of all the variables going to come into play. And he does that with beautiful, beautiful movement, obviously finger, hand, and foot movement, and that's what we're seeing there. We're seeing Max Verstappen at his very best, really, on a fast medium corner like that, going in pretty deep, living with what the car's going to do, and then coming out. And that's why he is as good as he is. And I think, I keep saying, it's Max, it's Lewis, it's Charles, and I still stand by that. It's those three guys are just, they have that ability. And I think Lewis yesterday was a typical Friday with Lewis. He's never going to be absolutely on it. He's going to make a few mistakes. He's going to be wondering why somebody's quick or somebody's slow or who's doing this or who's doing that. But come Saturday, Lewis has this ability always to get it together. Everything's in order and everything looks logical to him. Well, he tries to make it look logical. And I think that's what we saw with Lewis today. And he just put that lap together beautifully. And why was he out-qualified by Valtteri Bottas? I mean, there's one thing you've got to say about Valtteri, and that is, generally speaking, he's usually 1 or 2 kilometers an hour quicker than Lewis in a straight line. That's a big generalization, and there are obvious examples of when that's not the case. And today they were identical, 3:48. But I do think Valtteri has this ability, and he's refound that ability to get the car absolutely straight as quickly as he possibly can. And he's doing that with some really nice mid-corner manipulation, and he's getting the car really straight. And he's driving almost a Lewis lap right now. I think that's what we saw from Valtteri today in Mexico, and it's kind of what we've been seeing over the last couple of races. He's ever since basically he signed for Alpha, he's come back to the Valtteri we used to know. And of course that raises another question, and I raised this point after Austin about Sergio Perez letting Max through on the opening lap after Max has sort of lost ground trying to go around the outside of Lewis at the hairpin after the start. And as they go into the S's, Sergio has the track position, but he just moves over for Max. And had he not done that, it's quite possible Max Verstappen would not have won the US Grand Prix. And it brings me back to my other point that Mercedes, and I'm sure Toto Wolff will be thinking, if only we waited a little bit longer, did we really want to get rid of Valtteri as Lewis as number 2? Because he's so good at this role, isn't he? He's quick enough to do the job. He's winning races, and he's never going to cramp Lewis's style. And it comes back to that moment in Austin. And I said, when it's George in the other Mercedes, is he going to do what Sergio did? Is he going to do that for Lewis? Answer, no way. George Russell is not that sort of driver. He's a lot of things. He's a very, very good driver. And I think because of that, Lewis's whole thing, his whole perception of life is going to change with George Russell in the car, because there are going to be moments when George for sure is going to be a little bit quicker or do something, go off in a different direction with the car and it'll work or something like that. Something will take away, so things will happen that will affect Lewis's, field of perception of where he is. And, if you're Mercedes now, you'll be thinking, wow, Valtteri is doing a really good job for us. So, yeah, really good lap by Valtteri. Just to confirm what he did, I mean, he was really quick on his first run, 15.8, and then he did a 15.9 on his second run. He's the only driver to get under 1:16, and he did it twice today. That's how impressive he was. Lewis did a 16.0 and then a 16.2 on his two Q3 runs, and Max did two 16.2s. So, and the second one obviously was a scruffy lap, and it might have been, if you take into account everything he lost, and you're probably looking at a 15.9 there. I would think. I think Valtteri probably would still have had the pole. I mean, that's just conjecture, but that's what it looked and felt like. Other results. Pierre Gasly was fifth. Very good job by Pierre. Incredibly quick in a straight line. I mean, that kind of confirms what I was saying earlier. 351 kilometers an hour with the Honda engine, and he's done a 16.4. And Max Verstappen 338 compared with 351. Big difference. And he's only 0.2 quicker. And it's Max Verstappen driving. Okay, Pierre Gasly's really good as well. So that shows that, I think Red Bull have kind of found that sweet spot of the car. And if they try to go beyond that, it ain't going to work. And that's possibly a frustration for them. Equally, it might be a satisfaction of knowing that they've got the car absolutely au point for the run on medium tyres. Charles Leclerc was quick in the first run of Q3. Did a 16.8, but then didn't really do. Then he did the same time again, actually, in the second run. Whereas Carlos Sainz went quicker. Started with a 17.1, then a 16.7. Had a few engine dramas, it looked like, which he got through. Did a good job. So Ferrari, all right. What sort of top speeds have Ferrari got? 346, 344 average, and they were sixth and eighth. Not that quick actually. Sort of. If you think about the Pierre Gaslys of this world and where they're at, and Daniel Ricciardo 350, Ferrari 346, 344, not great. But that's possibly, again, I think they've probably found their sweet spot of the car and how far they can go with it. And Lando Norris had a couple of braking dramas going into turn one and a few discussions with the engineers, a bit of fun. But all that's moot as well, because Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, Yuki Tsunoda and Lance Stroll all starting from the back of the grid. You can say that Lance Stroll kind of not only started from the back of the grid, probably 2 laps behind, in fact, because he was back of the grid anyway because of an engine change, and now he's back of the grid anyway because he went off and had a shunt, so he's double back of the grid. So, put him on the other side of the circuit. And George Russell, who did make it through to Q2 in the Williams, yet again, has got a 5-place grid penalty for the gearbox drama he had yesterday. So, lots of activity going on at the back of the grid as ever. But for me, this was a really impressive performance by Mercedes. To look at what happened yesterday. Of course, it's always easier when you're coming from behind to look at all the framework of where you are and say, right, this is where we can improve, this is what we don't want to touch, and you can make those logical changes. And that's what Mercedes did, and they did it really well. So all credit to everybody on the ground there. Red Bull, by contrast, kind of had such a good package yesterday. It was like, well, what do we do with it now? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But they did, and Max obviously won't be happy with that, but equally, as I say, on the medium tyre, and if you look at what he did in Q2 on the medium tyre, that could be the way the race goes tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see. So it'll be a really, really interesting day, I think. If Max was on the pole, I think we'd be saying it's going to be Mexico, as I said yesterday in the title. Perhaps it's not Mexico at the moment, but it could well be tomorrow. But it'll be an interesting race between Max and the two Mercedes drivers, with Sergio Perez hopefully watching them all and maybe taking advantage and doing something for the crowd as well. We'll have a look then and see you then.